Welcome back to Hoosier Sports Report. I'm Courtney Robb, and today we're bringing you a special Little 500 edition. With the races coming up, what better way to preview them than with a man who is racing near and dear to his heart? Joining me in the studio today is Indiana Rivals reporter Sam Beizeishuin to talk all things Little 500. Sam, thanks for joining us.
No, this is my favorite time of the year at Indiana University. Nothing is better than Little 500 weekend. The bicycle race is, honestly, it's the best sporting event IU has to offer.
And we love having you here, as you know. So I want to jump right into it, talk some top contenders. As you know, there's no defending champion this year, given the events from last year. So, they have Sigma Alpha Epsilon going in, Delta Gamma. Who do you think is going to be the number one coming into this weekend?
Yeah, it's really weird that we're not going to see a yellow jersey on the racetrack that goes to the defending champion, because Phoenix Cycling, who won the women's race, that was basically Tabitha Sherwood's creation. She was the best women's rider the last 2 years. She graduated. I think there was a while where we thought she would still form a team and have somebody carry on her legacy. She didn't, so no defending women's champion. Same thing on the men's side, but for a different reason. Delts is unfortunately not part of the campus anymore. It happens. They're technically still there.
They're still there.
Because they
Blackie
are
Bulls.
Well, they are jet black.
Oh, they are
jet black, which is the initials of their founders. So they're kind of there, but they can't wear the yellow jersey. So that kind of leaves it wide open. And if you're looking historically, you don't have to make it more complicated than it is. In these races, you look at qualifying. 6 of the last 8 winners on the men's side have come from the first row. So you look at SAE, Beta, and Cutters and say, one of those on the men's side probably going to win. That's going to be the favorites to win. Obviously, you have sleepers back there. BKB, it's weird to call them a sleeper, the Blackie Bulls, because they're just historically so good. But they're starting 8th, and that's not really indicative of their strength. They faulted on their first qualifying run. They want to get a safe pick in, so they're starting 8th. I like them. Really, those are the 4 teams to look for on the men's side. Just look at those front few rows. The women's side, that's a little bit easier, I think. You have a clear, 1, 2, 3 in the women's field. DG, your pole sitters, who just put a blistering lap down. Their qualifying run would have put them 23rd or 24th in the men's field, which is ridiculously quick. Theta, second, they're a power. If anybody knows anything about the women's Little 500, it's Theta's going to be there every single year. They're just good. And AO Pi, really strong team. They've been strong, but they had 2 in the top 7 in the ITT qualifying, so they just got top end strength. Really, it's going to be fun. But the front rows, the top 3 on both sides, that's where you gotta look. Don't make it more complicated than it is. Don't try to outsmart yourself. Those are the quick teams.
I definitely agree with you that qualifications are a huge indicator when it comes to looking at who's going to take the race. And we talked a little about SAE as well as DG, and both those teams have some family history to them. You have Joe Krahulik, whose brother, had that legacy. You have the DG sisters who are racing this year. The Bignell sisters are racing together in the women's Little 500. Do you think that factors into their drive to want to take that race?
It's cool. The Little 500, there's a lot of it is family. There's quite a few brother-sister combinations that have ridden this race, that will ride in this race. The Krahuliks are kind of cool. Like you mentioned, Joe, who's a junior, his older brother Andy was a longtime rider. They raced together last year. Joe was the better of the 2 brothers last year, even though he's the little guy. He's not really little. It's kind of cool they raced together. Now Joe's on his own. He's got a completely new look team with SAE. He really willed them to their qualifying run. He took 2 of the 4 laps and has a bunch of rookies with him, 3 rookie riders who are upperclassmen but haven't been in the Little 500. You can't replace that. But it is cool because he's been around his older brother. They've got a younger brother who's a senior in high school. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's destined to be in the Little 500 as well. That's kind of how it goes. I know those 2 were close. On the women's side, it's super cool when you do have sisters riding for the same team, and Kristen and Lori Bignell. Kristen's kind of been there, done that. She's one of the dominant riders in the women's field for DG. She's always going to be someone to mess with. Lori, she was with another team that was kind of affiliated with DG, Anchors Away, last year. Then she's moved to DG's actual team this year. It'll be interesting to see how she does in her first race. That team is just deep, just lots and lots of talent on it. It's cool. I love seeing that. Who wouldn't you want to ride with more than your own family?
Yeah, and it's especially cool given that this year is the 30th anniversary of the women's Little 500 race. If you don't know before, they used to do a trike race to kind of equal it out between the men's race back in the day until they had the women's race. Now, the trike race did continue up until 2004, but now it's just the women's Little 500. So I want to touch on, if you can touch a little bit on the history with that, as well as Why do you think the 30th anniversary is so special to these women riding?
No, it's cool. It's strange to think that it took that long for the women to get their actual race. And it wasn't from a lack of effort. There were a few women's teams making attempts to qualify for the men's race. The most notable came in 1986 when Theta, ironically, qualified 34th, so one spot out from making the men's field. And at that point, they kind of said, hey, there's some really strong, talented women on this campus, and if they want to race, let's give them a race. So 30 years later, here we are.
Right.
And it's cool to see just the strength of the women's field emerge, because at first it was new. There weren't teams preparing. I mean, the men's teams and now the women's teams, they prepare for years and years just to be ready for this race. But now, if you looked at the fields, just how close they are, the top 3 women this year, the top 3 women's teams, would have all qualified for the men's field. Like we mentioned earlier, Kappa Theta, Alpha Theta would have qualified 23rd in the men's field. It's just neat to see how much stronger they are. They're here to play, and it's just a lot of history. And I know it's such a special event for the men. It always has been. This is the 67th men's race, but it is and always will be a chance for women to create their own legacies. And it's cool. There's nothing like it. It's just special for them as much as it is for the men.
Yeah. So that's really cool. You know, catch them. They're going to be racing on Saturday, tomorrow actually, Friday at 4. It'll kick off. So, you know, the last thing I want to talk about is some dark horse teams to look out for. You never want to rule out the underdog, especially when you have times that are so close. I'm personally hearing Phi Mu and 3PH, but Sam, I'm curious about your thoughts of who you think could possibly come in and take the race from the first place qualifiers.
Sure, I completely agree with you, those 2 names. 3PH is a one that I love. I love those guys. I mean, you just look at a bunch of kids who said, man, wouldn't it be cool if we started a little 500 team? And a lot of people, when you're in college, you say that. They did it, and they're one of the most experienced teams. They're starting 9th. Reed Wilson, who was 7th in the individual time trials, is kind of their, I don't know, he's their rock. And that's the biggest thing when you look at these independent teams that form themselves out of really nowhere is, where's your sprinter going to come from? Who's going to really carry that team? It's Reed Wilson. He's going to be able to carry 3PH. If they're hanging around like they did last year, they finished 5th last year, they'll have a chance. And that's really all you can ask for. On the women's side, I really like Melanzana. They have maybe one of the top riders in the field in Brooke Hannon. She was 1st in the ITTs. They've got 2 riders in the top 13, I believe, in the ITTs. They're starting 13th. All you need is one quick rider. Brooke is a quick rider. If they can hang around, then they'll be there to play at the end. I mean, it really just depends for both of these how the races shape out. Last year we saw, especially on the men's side, nobody wanted to do anything. They didn't want to drop anybody. Cutters kind of made a run at it at lap 165 or so. They started to try to break away from the pack when there was 10 or 11 teams hanging around. They did cut it to 5 or 6 teams by the end of the race, but nobody was really making a move. The women's side was a little different. I think Tabitha Sherwood was pushing the pace a little bit more. And that's when you saw Theta follow along. It was really more of a 2 or 3 horse race by the end. Just so many things could happen in this race that kill the underdog, and mostly that's one of the dominant teams pushing the pace. So if a team like a BKB, an SAE, a Beta on the men's side says, yeah, let's keep the field as big as we can, let's not worry about burning our legs, let's just get ready for the sprint, that's when you can have a team like a 3PH hang around and win at the end. If they decide to push the tempo like Cutters typically likes to do, one of their strategies that they used so well back when they were just dominating was, with 40 or 50 laps to go, they just run away from everybody and hide. Then you have 2 or 3 competitors, you dodge it out, you fight it out with the top teams. But if that doesn't happen and you do let a few teams hang around, you might get an upset. That's the men's field, that's the women's field, it just depends. And with weather, with rain that could be happening, the rain that's happening today, that could blow everything up. And with rain, these riders, they're not used to it. They don't really, when you have a bad day outside, you're almost used to going, it's raining, it's not going to be like that on race day. But if it is, it just throws everything off. It makes everything more confusing. Who knows? But 3PH, Phi Mu, Melanzana, I mean, even Sig Ep is kind of a sleeper on the men's side, and they won just 2 years ago. Nobody's really talking about them. There's up and down the field, there's nothing like this race because you don't know what could happen. And I mean, just pick your favorite team and go with it. They'll have a chance.
Right. I think that's what's so unique is that, you really don't know who's going to come out on top. Looking at the forecast a little bit, there will be some rain for the men's race, which will possibly make the track a little bit more slicker, which means there's a chance that they can go faster, which will definitely make the race a bit more interesting. The races kick off tomorrow, like I said earlier, April 20th, with the women's at 4 p.m. and the men's the following day at noon. Make sure to follow both Sam and the Hoosier Sports Report for all the action. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.